the meantime, while people are still getting inside of our Zoom meeting, maybe I can start already with a small introduction.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you everyone for joining us and welcome to our IIF Early Career Researchers webinar on public speaking by Shari De Baets, the one and only Shari De Baets. Before we get started, let me briefly give you an introduction about who we are and what we do. So we are the Early Career Researchers Network, or briefly ECR, supported by the International Institute of Forecasters. So what do? Well, we try to build a community of young people in the forecasting domain, being PhDs, being postdocs, being newly or less newly appointed faculty, and everybody interested in forecasting and in growing their network, in learning, in sharing ideas. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to really build a community of engaged people. So who are we? Well, we are Shari, speaker of today, Anna, Michael, Margaretha, and myself. So the 5 of us are trying to support all the activities of the Early Career Researchers Network. If you are interested in more of our activities or in what we are doing, well, you can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook with the names that are here on the slide. And we also post on YouTube via the IIF YouTube channel, where you can also find the recordings of our past webinars. Now, some small practicalities about today's webinar. So we would like to ask you to mute your microphone during the webinar. You can post your questions in the chat, and then Shari will, when she finds it a suitable time, she will respond to them or after the webinar. And also note that this webinar will be recorded and also uploaded to YouTube. So we just want to notify you of this. If you want to turn on your video, we would love that. But if you don't want to, we're of course also totally fine with that, because we're going to record. Also, if you don't want your name to show, you can also anonymize yourself if you don't want to be shown as a participant of this webinar. And with this brief introduction of who we are and what we do, I would now really love to give the floor to Shari, who is well, not only the speaker of today, but also the president of the IIF ECR. So we're really happy that she wanted to make the time to share her thoughts and insights on public speaking. And
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for making me sound so very impressive. So yeah, I'm going to give a seminar on public speaking or presentation skills. Let me first do the share screen thing. You see, I'm very professional. Okay, I hope it's visible now. If it's not.
Perfect, Shari.
Okay, great. So public speaking, what am I going to talk about? I am going to talk about it from a sort of coaching and growth perspective, because people who knew me 10 years ago know me as someone who was so afraid of presenting and was also quite bad at it. And nowadays I get compliments on it and like, oh, you're a natural. And I'm like, I'm not a natural. I worked on this for 10 years. And I want to show you, just want to share my journey and share the things that I've learned in the hope that it may help you in becoming more secure and you know, in becoming a better presenter. So the first bit that I'm going to talk about is based on my journey. It's some personal insight. I will talk about leaving your comfort zone, and I will give you what I've called free life lessons. I will also talk about some general presentation guidelines on slide design, how to tell a story and how to gauge your audience, and speech and gesturing, how to use your voice and how to use gesturing and your general image. So this is not a top 10 presentation skills for beginners. It is, let me show you what I did and what I had difficulty with, and hopefully I can transfer some of my experiences as knowledge to you. I think that actually the first bit is the most important stuff. My goal is that when you are now going to be asked for a presentation or to give a speech somewhere, that instead of this reaction, you will go towards this reaction. You're gonna take it on and make it happen, which is the model from ING that I learned from my boyfriend. So take it on and make it happen. We're going to start with 3 things to remember. The first thing to remember is that you are not alone in this. I can't think of anyone who isn't nervous before giving a presentation or before giving a speech, or maybe even before talking into a group, whether it be large or small. I know professors who have told me that if they have to teach a new subject, their first class, and even if they have 20 years of experience, they still get nerves. You are not alone in this. So many people absolutely hate it because they get so nervous for it. That helped me, knowing that I was not an outlier, but that it's actually really common. The second life lesson, and I've been recently told that Borat memes are no longer cool, but I never pretended to be cool, so here's a Borat meme. Very nice, great success. People want you to succeed. Your audience isn't there to, they don't want to see you fail. They have good intentions, because if your presentation is good, they have a pleasant time as well. So the audience is positive. It's not there to criticize you. And the third life lesson is, I have something against proverbs like leaders are born, not made. I think that is untrue for most of the skills in existence. Like most skills, presenting, talking in public, talking in groups, is something that you can learn. It is not something you are born into, very few are. It is experience and practice and knowing yourself. So, what are my life lessons? First of all, I want to talk to you about the horror that is the phrase, leave your comfort zone. You will have to. If you Google comfort zone, generally this is the image that you get. Now, what this image thinks or represents is the expectation that if you jump out of the bowl, you will jump into another safe environment and succeed. Also, behold my awesome Photoshop skills. The truth is, in reality, you'll often just fall down and flop around. That is okay. That is going to happen, and that is what you will learn from. Yeah? Leaving your comfort zone means stumbling once in a while and falling face down, sometimes literally in front of an audience. My very personal insight. I promised you some personal insight. There is a note that I have kept from over 10 years ago. I started working in August 2010 and had the opportunity to follow a presentation course the year after. Our first assignment was, during the first course, to give a presentation on our research topic. Here is the feedback that I got. You use too many slides. There is too much information on your slides. There is too much text on your slides and you use long sentences. Your tables are too small and we can't read them. It's still not clear to me what your core research question is, and that's kind of painful because you've been kind of talking about it for 10 minutes. There is no flow in your story. It's too technical. You speak too soft. You speak very monotone. You speak too fast. Your facial expression tells me you do not want to be here. Well, that's the case, but it shouldn't be readable on your face. You look nervous. That is also the case, but they shouldn't be able to see that. You look insecure. Again, true. Don't put your hands in your pockets, something I apparently did and comes off as too laid back. So, as you can see, that was quite a bit. And I have to be honest, I was really bad at presenting. I was even bad at just speaking in a small group. That already made me nervous. So I'm going to base the structure of this presentation a bit on the feedback that I got. So, oh, you stand too still. There was another one. I almost forgot it. I stand too still. The first bit is the part about slide design, telling a story, and knowing your audience. Whereas the second bit concentrates on using your voice, on gesturing, and your general position. So, what are my free life lessons? The first one, and this is Old Greek. I had 3 hours of Greek before the lockdown happened, so I couldn't read it. I had an idea, but I did check, thank you, Photios, how to pronounce it. And if I got it correct, it's gnoti seafton, and it means know thyself. It is one of the 3 maxims that can be found in the Temple of Apollo at the Delphi site in Greece. See, free life lesson, free history lesson. And it's one of 3. So the first one is know thyself. The second one, for those who are curious, is nothing to excess. And the third one is surety brings ruin. Smart cookies, those Greeks. We still use those expressions today. But I want to focus on the first one, on know thyself, because that is the core starting point of personal development. So I make a distinction here between who you are at home with friends versus who you are in work situations and when you need to present. Also notice that I've tried to make it clear here that it's never one or the other, it's a gradation. You are not an introvert or an extrovert, you are somewhere along the scale. You can be soft-spoken or you can lean more towards being loud and boisterous. You can be naturally detail-oriented or look at the bigger picture. You can be formal or more informal, prefer one-on-one chats or group conversations. This list is not exhaustive. There are so many things. And remember that it's never negative or positive. It's not negative to be introverted. It's not negative to be extroverted. Both have their upsides and their downsides. But what you do have to take into account is that under stress, and we can consider presentations and public speaking as stressful situations, under stress, whoever you are, whatever characteristics you may have, they come more to the forefront. So I was leaning towards introversion, which meant that under stress, I became even more silent and I became uncomfortable in group. So define for yourself what your characteristics are, and then you will know what your strengths are and what your possible pitfalls are under stress. For example, I'm taking one of mine. While presenting, you speak too fast. Now, the general guideline is speak slower, but that doesn't tell you much. So I focused on looking up easy tricks. The first one I totally made up myself in a conversation with someone else. And that is, if you speak too fast, slow down to what you think is normal, and then go another third of the way. Because and here comes my biases research, your anchor is too high. You need to adjust downwards and just add a little bit more because you normally don't adjust enough. So slow down. How can you slow down? If you notice that you're starting to talk too fast, take a sip from your water bottle. I always have one standing next to me. Take a breath after every slide. That is important. I got out of breath after 5 minutes of presenting because I just went from slide to slide to slide in one full story without taking a break to just simply breathe. If you really want a few seconds to, get yourself together, ask the audience, is everything clear so far? Do you have any questions? And then you leave a few seconds of pause so that people can either formulate their question and you can get yourself together again. The other example that I got was you stand too still, you come off as very stiff and you're very static. Same rule. If you think you're moving enough now, move a little bit more. Now I have to admit that most of these tips are not Corona proof, and I will give some more detail on online presenting towards the end of the presentation. But to walk around while presenting, it gives off a very lively vibe. It gives off enthusiasm. You can even work off some of your nervous energy. And to be able to do that, preferably don't use a fixed mic or a pedestal. Those things are killers for attention spans. Unless you are a super engaging speaker naturally, standing still behind a pedestal will make people's attention drift. I, for instance, always have, I call it my clicker thingy, because I don't know what it's called. The presentation thing that you can use for going to the next slide, because if you're walking around and you always have to turn back to where the computer is for the next slide, you're interrupting your flow. So I always have my personal clicker with me. And practice. When you practice your presentation, do it as if you were doing the presentation itself. That means if you're going to walk around during the actual presentation, do it during practicing as well. Gesture, don't sit down. We have no choice at the moment for not sitting down. So some things become more important. So that's my personal insight. That was the first life lesson, know yourself. The second one is the simple phrase, work hard, stay humble. Work hard is follow courses. I have followed, I think, 4 courses on presentation skills and public speaking. Many of them were several days. And if you can't follow them at the moment due to Corona or you don't see an offer anywhere, use this amazing place that we all know is called the internet. YouTube is your friend for a lot of skills that you can learn, amongst which presentation skills. And you can learn by, for instance, looking at TED Talks, either off topic, where you learn by seeing people perform, or there are TED Talks explicitly on public speaking. They are great sources. Did you know that there's a world championship of speaking? The winner every year records a clip and makes his speech again for the audience, which is on YouTube. You can simply Google that or YouTube that. That doesn't sound right, but you know what I mean. And another tip is don't look for 10 tips for beginners because they will be too vague. They will tell you come off as confident, but then you still don't know how. They will tell you have a good speaking pace, but unless you know first if you're too slow or too fast, that tip is still very general and you still don't know how to tackle it practically. But go for specific videos. I have learned a lot about voice and about gesturing and about pace by looking at YouTube clips. Some of them are really great. So work hard, follow courses is my first advice. The other thing is know your stuff. That may seem kind of obvious, but it is much easier to keep the flow in a story if you are so very sure of what you're talking about. It also means that if you start to deviate from your story, for instance, because someone asked a question, that you can easily go back to it and don't have to think about what was the correct formulation again, because you're not a dictionary, you're not defining things, you're telling a story to the audience. And for that, you need to know what you're talking about. The other one will work hard is my next life lesson, which I will go into after this slide. The stay humble part is always stay open for feedback. I have kept that note for 10 years because after I got that, oh shit, there went my camera. Um, After I got that feedback, I cried and raged at home in private, of course. I was really angry. I slept on it and I thought about it for a few days. And then I thought, well, actually, they're right. And it is an important skill to have. So I am going to work on it. And even if you have worked on it for 10 years, still be open for feedback. Feedback is what makes you grow. If it's harsh feedback, just smile and nod and say thank you for your input. I will take it into account. Go home, rage, shoot a bow and arrow at a picture of the person. And after that, process it and think about it. And if it's really to the point, I mean, change, adapt, work on it. And that leads me to my next and last free life lesson. I always try to get some sci-fi in a presentation, but as we all know, or as most nerds know, Yoda said, "Do or do not. There is no try." I've changed that when it comes to learning presentation skills. Do. There is no other option. You simply have to do it to learn. What do I mean by that? First of all, practice. Start with practicing by yourself, going through your slides and see if your slides follow the story that you're telling. Once that's on point, you can start practicing with different audiences. And if you're really nervous, you can build it up. Start with one person you trust, your partner, for instance, then start with a small group of familiar people, test with experts, test with novices. And now I hear you thinking, Shari, you're going completely overboard. No one ever does that. Well, I did in the first few years. I remember that the presentation I had to do for an academic jury to get my PhD funding, I did 8 practice runs, all with different audiences, just to get the story flow going and not to learn things by heart, but by rephrasing it a bit differently every time, you learn to be more natural. So actually, it's practice until you no longer seem practiced, but you seem natural. Why did I say both experts and novices? Novices, or people who don't know anything about what you're presenting, is this quote: "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." So you should be able to talk to your parents or grandparents or sisters or brothers who are in a completely different field, who are in a completely different job, and you should be able to explain what you do without using jargon and big words, for instance. And that brings me to my last bit, and that is seize every opportunity you get to present, even if you don't really want to. And we all don't really want to, or most of us, but do it anyway. Be that person that when it's asked in a team to give a presentation or when it's asked to present project work, be that annoying person that is over enthusiastic, jump and raise your hand and say, "I'll do it," even if you don't want to. That was my approach. I took on every presentation I could get, and that is what helped me a lot. So instead of carpe diem, I said carpe the presentation. Just seize the presentation opportunity as much as you can. How can you do this? There are 3 exercises. The last one is, of course, what I already handled, is practice runs. The first one is a typical exercise they give to people who are very specialized in a field often. And it's an elevator pitch. So imagine you're in the elevator. You have to go up 7, 8 floors. Someone steps in as well and asks you, "Oh, what are you doing for work?" Or "What is your topic?" And then You have to explain within a 2-minute time frame, so before the elevator doors open again, what your topic is or what your project is in simple words. And you need to cover why, what, and how. That is a nice exercise that you can do for yourself with a timer and that you can test out on other people to see if it's understandable and if it makes everything clear. The other exercise is one that I have done as well, and I absolutely loved it, and that is called a pechakucha. First, learn how to pronounce it, pechakucha. Um, it is 20 slides with a timer put on the slides that goes to the next one every 20 seconds. You are not allowed to use words, only pictures. So 20 slides, each having a picture, changing every 20 seconds. So it's about 6 minutes and 20 in total, I think. That is a really good way of learning how to tell a story instead of presenting. And telling a story, I'll get back to that. That is the most important bit. There is nothing worse, in my humble opinion, than someone reading off their slides and calling it teaching or presenting or public speaking. That is not public speaking. That is reading aloud. That's not a way to hold the attention of your audience. So a pechakucha, great fun. Do it for yourself. It can be challenging, especially if you have to find a visual representation of abstract concepts. But go for it anyway. It's a good exercise. So I've come to general presentation guidelines. The first one is about slide design. And I am going to talk here about my personal things that I find annoying with others. It's not complete. There are many other things that you can learn by YouTube videos, again, by looking at good presentations from others. But I am going to focus firstly on tables. This one is especially for the researchers and analysts in the audience who like to use tables. It's horrible. You are able to see it now because we are all looking on a computer screen. But when it's presented on a big white screen hanging on a wall, only the first few rows will be able to see it, and the rest will be leaning forward and trying to peer to distinguish the numbers. And then most of all will mentally check out because it's such an overflowing information. So tables like that, I say no. But of course, tables can be very interesting and can hold interesting information. So I learned this trick from watching someone else present, and that is simply zooming out. So you make your table a bit smaller and you leave space for the topic that you are talking about, and you zoom that out. So in this case, I will talk about the numbers on gender, which was hard to see in the previous table because that's just an overflow of information, but which here is, taken out of the whole table and is much more clear. You can do that for every figure you want and several slides after each other. It's not like you only need to focus on one thing. But yeah, that makes it more clear for people. The other thing that I want to focus on is full sentences and paragraphs on slides. That is one of the core feedbacks that I got, is nobody is listening to you. People read before they listen. So when I display this, chances are that you are reading it. So I'm going to present now this slide. So my topic is on algorithm aversion and appreciation nowadays. Mill already showed that people had a general distrust toward algorithms despite their superior performance, and his results were based on more than 20 studies. These results were further confirmed by Dawes and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so either you were reading or you were actually zoning out, or you were still paying attention because I kept it short. But you will have noticed that I started speaking faster naturally. That is because I have the feeling that time is short and that I need to explain everything that is on the slide word for word and read it for you. Again, that's reading aloud, that's not presenting. Try to use this as little as possible. So as little as possible, full sentences or paragraphs. I lean towards the other extreme now, and that is only keywords and pictures. So this, I say big no. This is how I explain my topic nowadays. I look at the choices people make if they have to choose advice between an algorithm on the left and between human judgment on the right. If people prefer the judgment over the algorithm, we talk about algorithm aversion. But the opposite also exists. That is people that prefer the computer model or the algorithm, and that is called algorithm appreciation. That is how I explain it. I will mention references if it's more an academic audience, but pictures draw attention. Animations where things come one by one are snaps for attention. And it makes you tell a story, and it doesn't make you speed up like full sentences do. So this is the way that I do it, and I also find that more, I like it more when people do it like that as well. Note with regard to pictures, mind copyright. I know this is a weird note, but we are all, especially if presenting externally, we all have to mind copyright, and they're really hammering down on that lately. So use copyright-free databases. There's a blog from 2021, so from this year, that has an overview. But the ones that I use the most are pictured below, and actually it's Pixabay that I use the most. Those are high quality pictures, and they're copyright free guaranteed. So ignore the lure of Google Images, because Google Images will give you many suitable results, but they're often from licensed photographers or from sites who have the rights to them. And as I said, it's especially important when you present externally. If you want to distribute your slides, you can make a picture-free version just to be sure. So on slide design, what I have to say is, please, summary results, not enormous tables. Keywords, not definitions. Pictures, not full text. Copyright free, not Google Images. And even a note on font that I've learned, Calibri reads well on a screen, and please don't use more than one font on the same slide. But that's maybe a personal thing towards consistency that I have. Side tip, a lot of universities and companies have their own presentation template with pre-made designs and often their own picture database. So, the source is there, use it. Now, tell a story. I've mentioned this a few times. That is based on the book that was recommended to me, Made to Stick, from Chip and Dan Heath. It's a super interesting book. I absolutely recommend it. They say that there are a few key things to making things stick, so making things rememberable. A story needs to be simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, and they should be stories. Now, I think they did that on purpose, because if you add an S after that, it spells success. This is all important because flow is so important. Like when you're writing a text or when you're talking to someone, you want there to be flow. It has to come naturally. It has to be logical as well. You don't jump from one thing to the other in everyday conversations. So why would you do that during a presentation? going to give you an example now. Sunk cost fallacy. I've been teaching lately on biases and heuristics, and I find sunk cost fallacy very interesting. I'm going to tell you what sunk cost fallacy is. A sunk cost, also known as a retrospective cost, is a cost that has already been incurred and cannot be recovered. They are contrasted with prospective costs, which are future costs that may be avoided if action is taken. In other words, a sunk cost is a sum paid in the past that is no longer relevant to decisions about the future. The fallacy is that people demonstrate a greater tendency to continue an endeavor once an investment in money, effort, or time has been made, says Wikipedia. So here I go again, talking faster. That was actually not on purpose. I intended to talk slower. The question is, will you remember this if I ask you in 2 months what sunk cost fallacy is? Or I'm going to present it via a story. You're probably not going to remember it. But here's the story about sunk cost fallacy. Ladies and gentlemen, meet my first car. Cool, isn't it? Yeah, I know, it's also a boy's car. I learned recently it's called the pocket rocket because it's so powerful and very small. I bought this car at my 18th birthday, and I paid 2,000 euros for it. I very soon noticed that the tires were in a really bad state, so I replaced the tires, which cost a bit of money. Then I went to the yearly road safety check we have in Belgium, and I got red flagged because my suspension was about to break down. So I had to replace my suspension. Big costs. A time after that, I had a crack in my windshield. I had to replace my windshield. Also lots of costs. And at that moment, you start wondering, or well, my parents started asking me, when will you stop putting money into that car? That is a sunk cost. I was basing myself on keeping it, well, because I liked it, but also I had already put so much money into it. But if you're talking about costs, you should think not about the costs you've already made, you should think about the costs that you're going to make. And that is sunk cost fallacy. We look backwards instead of forwards when it goes to costs and investments. If you're going to ask me now, how did you overcome this fallacy? Well, the world kind of intervened, or my driving skills, because I took a corner a bit too quickly and I crashed into a parked car and a tree. That is how my problem was solved. But that is a sunk cost fallacy. Now, if I ask you in 2 months' time, what is sunk cost fallacy? Are you going to remember the Wikipedia explanation?
No.
Or are you going to remember the idiot that drove their favorite car against a parked car? I'm guessing it will be the story. Yeah, that is what Made to Stick is all about. That's why you should tell a story. Know your audience, something completely different. What is their level of expertise is the first one. Are they fellow experts in your domain or another domain? What's their educational level? Are they perhaps complete novices? You will have to adapt your presentation accordingly. I added a little joke here on jargon. Try to avoid it as much as possible, so very field-specific words. You might think that it makes you look smart, but it makes you look like a pompous, am I allowed to say ass on TV? Yeah, it makes you look like a pompous ass, really. Use simple words instead of words that are very long and intricate, and that you just want to show your intelligence. Don't. We talked about formality. If you still understood that, so it depends on hierarchy, organizational culture, and the goal of your meeting, and that you have to adapt your level of humor that you use, and well, your attire as well. Don't go overboard. if you're curious, this outfit is for sale on Zalando. If you buy it, please put it on and take a picture and send it to us. I have no idea who would be the audience for this kind of stuff, but anyway. So if we go to the next one, you have the participation level. We just had an example of unwanted participation levels, but it depends on several things. So usually it depends on people's personality. Some people are comfortable asking questions and interrupting you, others are not. People high in hierarchy also tend to feel more comfortable to interrupt what you're saying. And people high in enthusiasm because they just can't hold themselves back. But again, it depends on the goal of the presentation. And you can steer it a bit. You can say either, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand and interrupt me. Or you can say, I have some time at the end foreseen for all Q&A. So you can lead people a bit in this. This is a joke especially for people who have attended conferences and are in the science field. A lot of the times you get, well, I have a question, but it's actually more of a comment. Just if you don't know what to do with that, often it's completely off topic. Smile, nod yes, and say, that is a very interesting perspective. Thank you. I'm going to look into that. At least that's the trick that people taught me. If you get questions you can't answer. So voice. This was for me very important. What is often cited as a big hurdle in another language is, oh, I have to present in English, but I have an accent. That is not a bad thing. Be proud that you're multilingual. Yeah, you know several languages, at least 2. Not a lot of people, not everyone does that or has that knowledge. Be proud of it. And I even heard recently from someone in the audience, hi Josh, that Americans, for instance, love it when you speak with an accent. It's actually a sign of status and of intelligence. If you're insecure, like I was with my 3 hours of Greek for explaining the old Greek maxim, ask for pronunciation advice from a native speaker. If you don't know a native speaker, you can consult online dictionaries, and a lot of them have these buttons next to them for with a loudspeaker on it, so that someone can pronounce it for you. So accent really does not matter at all. Don't be insecure about that. But what matters is your voice. You remember that I got the feedback that I spoke too monotone, too fast, and that they weren't able to follow what I was saying. So the voice is very important. First of all, there's intonation. Some languages have it naturally more than others, but intonation is what grabs people's attention. And it comes also more naturally when you're telling a story. Use volume, both suddenly speaking really soft or increasing how hard you're speaking are attention grabbers. Even when soft speaking, people will suddenly lean forward like, what is she saying? And then you have their attention again. Pace yourself. This is something that I really need to consciously do. And I've been trying to apply that by holding mini breaks every time I go through a bullet point and in between slides. See, I'm doing it now. Pausing. And I gave the tip there, have a water bottle nearby. Another way to pause is have people hack your Zoom account. But that was rather stressful than relaxing. So that's not a tip. But do take the necessary pauses for catching your breath, and for the audience as well to have that second of disconnect and then connect again. And don't forget to breathe. Yeah, after every slide, whenever you need it, breathe. Gesturing. There are some general gestures that are cross-cultural and mean the same. And I have some examples. You can see the slide at the site below where you can find all of them. But for instance, this means I am open. It's kind of natural, but if you're not used to using your hands, this means natural. This means I'm open. Never cross in front of you, because that means I'm closed off. You may do it subconsciously, don't do it. As you remember from the feedback in the beginning, I stuck my hands in my pockets and I didn't use gesturing at all. I apply that now in my daily conversations as well, because it just makes you more lively and makes you more enthusiastic and interesting. The following one is finger counting. I know this is silly, but it is an attention grabber for the audience because they want to know what's next. I have 3 things to discuss. First of all, you need to be open. Second of all, you need to use finger counting. Now you're curious about what the third one is, so you're paying attention. The third one, by the way, is this sign. It means I'm honest, I'm true, I'm not lying. You may think, well, that's a bit overboard, but that's what we subconsciously perceive from gestures. Last tip on general image, smile. It makes such a difference. Seriously, smile. It makes you look interested, enthusiastic, and if you want to be there, even though you may not, in fact, but just smile, paste it on. And be comfortable. I know this is a weird one, but for instance, I'm, as most of you know, a trainers and sneakers kind of girl. But in the beginning, when I had to present, I did the whole tight skirts, stockings, and heels thing. I was constantly worried that I would trip over my own feet, would break an ankle, would trip over the carpet while walking around. If you never wear heels, don't start at a presentation. You're just giving yourself an extra stressor. Similarly, men, never wear a tie. Don't start at a presentation because it will make you feel constricted. Make yourself as comfortable as possible. And this is an example of still looking formal, without formal shoes, without a tie. You can pull it off. And I have noticed that the most often worn shoes for professors are sneakers. That is what I see the most. Simple sneakers. So that is what I started wearing as well. Just make yourself as comfortable as you can be. So how about online? I've told you before that some of my tips, like walking around to give off energy, are not corona-proof. We are presenting online nowadays. We are teaching online, and it is inherently more static. If I start moving a lot on my chair now, you will just find it annoying instead of interesting. So the visual cues fall away, largely. Some concrete tips. Voice matters even more. Your intonation, your pausing, it matters even more. Keep it brief. And I am going against my own advice here. Well, we had the unforeseen little bit of delay, but people are suffering from webinar or teaching or Skype overload, meeting overload. Stick to 30 minutes maximum if you can, because there are so many distractions when you're working from home. When you're just simply looking at a computer, we have much more limited attention span than if we are in a classroom. What gesturing is concerned, don't block your screen when you're trying to say something, because it's really annoying. And you're gonna laugh with this one. Don't point at your slide with your hand, but with your mouse. Why do I say this? Which idiot does that? Me. I keep, as I would normally use my little clicker thingy with its laser to point out things on my slides, nowadays I point towards my computer screen, but no one can see that. And I do it over and over again. Use your mouse if you want to indicate something. And then after gesturing, I just want to make a note that interaction is really hard. People do not like answering in microphones. That's why if you have a question, and that accounts for this webinar as well, just use the chat function. Encourage people from the beginning to use the chat function for their questions. It also gives you some control on when you will answer it. Well, we've unfortunately lost the chat of the previous one, but if you still have questions, type them here. And I will probably don't have much time to answer because we're going over time, but I can always make a summary on LinkedIn or give you a private answer. So now, what do? We learn to know ourselves. We work hard, but we stay humble. And we do. Thank you for your attention. And thank you for rejoining us. I am very sorry for those who didn't find the link that we posted in time. If you want to further contact me, I'm available on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. And also, here are the social media details of the ECR.